Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. And as we mark today, day 481 since the Islamist Hamas launched its heinous onslaught on October 7th of 2023, we are now one day before the next installment of a number of hostages that will be released, God willing, in the next 24 hours. On that, and specifically on the Gaza Strip, let's now turn to our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Owen. Amir, I'd like you to focus just on the Gaza Strip initially. What are we seeing, what are we hearing, and what are we to expect in the next 24 hours?
So there are interrelated events, one of which you alluded to, the release ahead of time of three hostages, two of them, the last females, one civilian and one soldier, held by Hamas and Islamic Jihad, and then the first male in this batch, probably, I couldn't call him an elderly man regarding our own age, but he is one of the more mature ones, and therefore is considered a humanitarian case. And on Saturday, 2 days later, another three are to be released. The context is that during this time, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians went home, or at least tried to go in the direction of what used to be home, through the coastal road. They went back to northern Gaza. Sometimes Hamas operatives tried to sneak in through them, and the insistence of Israeli troops not to allow it and to fire to warn those who made ominous movements towards them caused a tragic incident in which an Israeli civilian working for the Ministry of Defense was killed by the troops because they misidentified him as a threat. So for the time being, the IDF is keeping the ceasefire. Hamas mostly keeps its side of the bargain, but this is all in the context of Prime Minister Netanyahu's trip to see President Trump next Tuesday at the White House.
Indeed. With regard to the Defense Ministry's contractor, of course, it's a very regrettable event. And right now there is an investigation launched into the circumstances of this incident to know what not to do in the future and to avoid such, yet again, regrettable events from recurring. With regard to the Prime Minister's trip, we are talking, of course, on the Prime Minister Netanyahu leaving on Sunday, during the course of which he will meet with different officials, also leaders from the Jewish community and others. On Tuesday, he is scheduled to meet with President Donald Trump in the White House, and on Thursday, he is scheduled also to return back to Israel. Now, let's turn to Central Israel, where we're joined by Brigadier General in Reserve Yaron Rosen, formerly the IDF Chief of Cyber Staff and Israel Air Force Commander and a fighter pilot. It's always a pleasure to have you with us, General. I'd like to immediately ask you also to provide your perspective to the current state of play in the Gaza Strip. We hear from U.S. President Donald Trump repeatedly stating his aspiration to see the relocation of a group of Gazans. He spoke at one point about 1 million or 1.5 million Gazans to be temporarily relocated to both Jordan and the neighboring Egypt, something that we immediately see a pushback from all of the Arab world. The Egyptian governor of Northern Sinai even went out and said, this is not an Egyptian interest. We don't want the Palestinian cause, quote unquote, to be lost, and we believe that this would happen if they would be transited, of course, to Egyptian territory. The leaders of None of those countries made any public statements about this other than second or third level officials, and therefore we'll have to wait and see how this evolves. But is this realistic?
I think we need to look on all of what's going on now as from a very high level before I go into some of the, issues you mentioned. We're in a regional tipping point. And I think that this is sort of a Kissinger moment, right? How do you turn battlefield victories into a new Middle East reality? And everyone understands that. The question is, what do all the players do? What does Israel do with all the complexities of Gaza, the hostage deal, the North, Iran, the change of administration in the US? What does the administration in the US want to do as a first step to show that things have changed from the Biden administration? There are so many levels here that need to come into play. And I think that, as always, because we're talking about, the Middle East is the Middle East and it will do its thing and try again and again to fail. That's just the region's character, if you will, sadly. I think the US here has to seize the moment, the Kissinger moment. And I'm really curious to see what the first step that we've been talking about in the past shows, what the U.S. administration will do first. And there are a few things that you can hear going on. First of all, the hostage deal is being brokered pretty powerfully. And the second thing is, how will that turn into the wider picture of the what we call the sustainable Sunni crescent, not the Islamist Sunni crescent, which we are all worried about, which is the Qatari, Turkish, and God knows what Syrian issue. So all these things are intertwined, and I think that is why the first step is so important. And it's even I want to try to compare it to Afghanistan for a second. Like, one of the things that was very, very harmful for the US foreign policy globally was the Afghanistan moment. Everybody looked at the Afghanistan moment and said, okay, the US is running away from these arenas. Let's see what we can do. And that gave a lot of power to Iran, et cetera, et cetera. Now, again, tying it back to US's credibility in the region. What does it do with allies? How does it build alliances? For the US to lead, it must prove it won't cut and run. So it has to reverse the Afghanistan moment, and that starts now.
I think it's important to note that the presidential envoy, Steve Witkoff, is currently in Israel for meetings with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He also intends to go to Gaza proper to see firsthand the Netzarim crossing or the blockade, or whatever you want to call it, in the central part of the Gaza Strip. And within that context, he just came also from Saudi Arabia, where he held high-level meetings to deliberate the prospects for normalization between Riyadh and Jerusalem, but also beyond that. He wants to establish a sort of package deal that will also include the Gaza Strip, Judea and Samaria, and other angles related to regional stability. But we will have to wait and see what is going to culminate out of the meeting between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu next week in the White House. I'd like to shift gears for a moment to northern Israel, where Defense Minister Israel Katz visited the peak of the Hermon mountain on the Syrian side of the demilitarized zone, or the armistice line of 1974. And for that, I'd like to invite the commander or former commander, Air Force commander, a fighter pilot, namely Brigadier General in Reserve, Relik Shafir. It's good to see you, General. We heard quite strong statements coming out of Jerusalem's top defense official, highlighting that Israel intends to maintain a military presence within the security zone indefinitely until, of course, some Israeli prerequisites will be accomplished. What are we to take out of those remarks?
I think this particular defense minister is speaking every day and is voicing his opinions almost every day on different matters, and he's losing some of his credibility by being too blatant without bringing any tangible solutions or tangible ideas to the table. So it's more of the same. Israel will stay there, just like Turkey will stay in the northeastern part of Syria to offset the PKK possible attacks. Same thing, Israel will stay at the Hermon, we call it the Syrian Hermon, and the demilitarized zone to make sure that chaos does not break out in the Golan area by possible ISIS or Daesh soldiers or militants. And it's not clear yet what the Syrians, where they're going, what they're going to face, and are they going to turn to the West, as it seems? Are they going to cooperate with Saudi Arabia? Are they going to be able to stronghold or put a stronghold on the different sects and tribes in Syria? So I would say that this is just a saying back to the Turks that if they think we will withdraw soon from these areas, then we will stay there until things become stable and safe for Israel. That is better safe than sorry. But there's nothing new. It's been said before. And so I don't think there's anything new in what the defense minister said.
He did highlight something new, though, with regard to the Sweda-Damascus route, namely the M5, which is a very strategic motorway, if I may call it that, from which the HTS, the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, al-Qaeda-linked group, sought to send a convoy to take over all of the important officials' buildings throughout Sweda, which is a governorate, of course, where the Druze are predominantly located and populated, something that was prevented by the Druze, who said, you're not coming in here and not taking over until our prerequisites are met, prerequisites that have been also voiced by both Washington and European countries, among others, towards Damascus. Nevertheless, Mr. Owen, when we're talking about this HTS group and Abu Muhammad al-Julani, it seems like they are very keen on consolidating their power without any concessions. And the Europeans have nonetheless decided to ease some of the sanctions, including with regard to energy and infrastructure and some economic benefits to try and help at least the Syrian population. But HTS itself has not utilized this for all the populations, rather only for its own populations and those who submitted to its rule.
So a couple of points there. First of all, regarding the Druze community in Syria, about which you are an expert, of course. There were circles in Israel led by former Foreign Minister Yigal Allon and Mossad chief Meir Amit, who regretted not having linked up to this area, to this enclave, either in 1967, when Israel went up the Golan Heights, or in 1973, after the Syrian offensive was rebuffed. Because of the links between the Druze communities in Syria as well as in Israel, without elaborating too much about it, Israel has both a security and emotional interest in safeguarding this community. Now, what Ahmed Ashara understands is that leaders around the world, in Europe, but not only there, are mostly pragmatic. They may issue declarations against terrorism, but they are always looking for someone to cut a deal with. And if Ashara is now wearing a suit and tie, if he speaks like a moderate, like a statesman, why not try to have a relationship with him, regardless of how he behaves inside Syria, whether it be the Alawites or the Kurds or whoever? They will give him a free rein. We have to see what happens with ISIS, with Daesh, because this is a separate fight. The Americans are there in order to keep Daesh from going back to their previous strength. But rather than that, for the time being, Al-Julani, Ashara, in the couple of months left before the presidential elections, will be handled with kid gloves.
Well, with regard to Daesh and Al-Julani, I think one and the same. They've made one and the same. They might be fighting each other. They might be fighting each other, but it has to do with the leadership, the same ideology that seeks to assert aspirations upon not only Syria, but when we're talking about the Europeans, special German envoy to Syria met today with Al-Julani, during the course of which he highlighted, even though we want to ease sanctions, we need the approval of all 27 member states of the European Union. It's going to take some time. I know a few foreign ministers in Europe have already conveyed that they will not just roll over and allow such an al-Qaeda figure to gain the funds needed to assert his jihadist aspirations upon the Syrian people. You're right. There are no permanent friends. There are no permanent enemies. There are only permanent interests. Nevertheless, the specific men that we're talking about after 9/11, the atrocities committed against the United States and went and joined Al-Qaeda to fight the Americans. So I ask myself whether such a person really reforms when just a few years ago, he committed massacres under his rule, and we can use that as a clear analogy to his various intentions throughout Syria, and he has not yet consolidated his power over Syria and a very small territory north of Damascus. But when we're looking at various developments in Syria, we also see that the Russians have sent a delegation to Damascus to meet with Al-Julani. And we hear from the Kremlin that they are seeking to establish friendly relationship with the new leaders in Damascus. Nonetheless, they did not deny the fact that the current jihadist group controls Damascus has requested compensation payments for Russia's involvement in the war against them, alongside the Assad regime and the expropriation. The former President Bashar al-Assad, they demand extradition to Syria to face their perception of justice. What are we to take of that? Do we expect the Russians to remain in Syria?
I think the Russians will remain there. There's a huge interest from Russia's perspective to hold on to Tartus and Khamimim, the port, the Navy port, and the Air Force base, which they have leased for years and years ahead. And they won't let go of it because this is the only place where they built their outset, that's where they can come out to the Mediterranean to sort of outflank NATO without going through the Bosphorus in Istanbul, which is a NATO member. So, and besides that, the ports in the Black Sea are too close to the Ukrainian arena and everything that's going on there. So they are under threat. So for Russia, it is absolutely crucial to continue to hold to Tartus and Khamimim. So for any the Russian policy will for sure be a very interest oriented? How do we cling on? How much should we help the new leader? What will we get out of here, out of that, or this or that? So for sure, we're going to see them playing in a very cynical way, like the Russians do, and they will, change their logic and tell a story, whatever suits their interests best. So yes, we will see that. But again, going back to what we've seen now, the moment of the redefining of the Sunni crescent, whether it's the Sunni Islamists versus the Sunni pragmatists, this is where I think it gets interesting because the Russians will have to see who's the stronger Sunni side. If they need to be partners of Saudi Arabia, it's very different from being partners with Qatar. They will do whatever needed to be with both. And again, sort of a strange enclave in the western coastline of Syria, which they will be there. So again, going back to the wider picture, the wider question, how does the Middle East move forward with this tipping point with the new administration in Washington, and what this will do to the future of the region, to the future of how Israel and the U.S. Define their relationship. Israel as an anchor of U.S. influence in the Middle East, as a origin of stability, mutual prosperity in the region. So sort of the U.S. flagship in the region. How do we change that and start moving forward from that? And how do we implement policies, borders, plans, alliances that serve this new narrative? Also facing the Russian interests in Russia, in Syria, sorry, as well. Everything is connected to everything. This is a huge, huge story that we're seeing just being written day by day.
And this rivalry does not stop in Syria, of course. Russia has taken or transited much of the equipment from Taltus and Latakia to Libya, where it is bolstering its presence, particularly on the side of the eastern border with Egypt, where we can see them backing the General Haftar, which opposes the Tripoli government on the western side of Libya, where we see the Qataris and the Turks being very proactive in the various activities there. Same goes for Somalia, where we're seeing rivalry between Russia and Turkey, as well as Iran playing a significant role there. We're seeing the same happen in Ethiopia and Sudan. And so Africa is becoming a battleground between those countries, and we're expecting to see a lot more from the continent in the next several months and years ahead. But General Shafir, when we're talking about Israeli intentions, and they have already started to do so from what I hear, to transfer all the Russian munitions that were found and then confiscated from Hezbollah, from Gaza, from Hamas, and others, Russian munitions that were probably delivered to the Iranians and then transited to the Iranian proxies will now be delivered to Ukraine. What are we to take out of that?
Well, this morning we saw in the news that the United States is relocating some of the anti-aircraft missiles, the Patriot missiles and batteries to Ukraine. And we're all envisioning some kind of a collision course, hopefully a peaceful one, between the United States and Russia. For Russia, Ukraine is the number one interest in settling it with the United States, which is already threatened. Putin would either make peace or we will turn on sanctions that will strangle the Russian economy even further. So this is why the United States is bolstering Ukraine. et cetera, et cetera. And maybe we will also move some of these weapons, even though I doubt it very much. We don't want to cross roads with the Russians. There's enough friction as it is. We have some interests in Russia and in this area. So I don't think a lot of things will happen, will move to Ukraine via Israel. I think the Ukrainians are looking for Western aid and help and munitions. So I don't think what you alluded to is going to happen. Another thing that that we need to talk about is the Saudis' position. The Saudis were asked by Trump a few days ago to invest about $600 billion in the US. And I think internal politics in the US is a lot dearer to Trump's heart than anything else. And he needs to lower the 25 budget from close to $2 trillion deficit. This can be done, and we see that he's doing it by raising the taxes on incoming goods and the Saudi type of investments. And what the Saudis want is a solution, or at least the beginning of a solution to the Palestinian problem. Israel may have to reverse its policy ever since Netanyahu came into power of siding with Hamas against the Palestinian Authority.
Well, I think Netanyahu reversed the policy vis-a-vis Hamas on October 7th. And I think every Israeli leader, including Bennett, including Lapid, who were prime ministers also in the last 3 years, they also maintained that same policy. Thankfully, there's some clear-eyed individuals behind the scenes operating this file, but everything is subject to negotiations, and the war is not over. That is something that I think is important to highlight. Once it's over, it will be known to be over. Until then, everything still can happen, and it's quite fluid. But this is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to thank General Shafir, General Rosen, and Mr. Oren for all of your insights. And I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next update from here in Jerusalem. Shalom.